Hello and welcome back, and I'm unmuting my mic this time. And we've spent the last sort of couple of weeks looking at microservices, and we've been looking at kind of the basics. So we've looked at how do we kind of build microservices with the Go standard library, and then starting to kind of refactor that up a little bit, create some nice RESTful patterns and start looking at REST. I think one of the things that I find when I'm dealing with the Go standard library is I end up creating a lot of really what feels like boilerplate code. I mean, stuff like, like this. Let's just have a look at this handler over here that we created last week. So we have this serve HTTP method, and we've got method get in here, and it's got to do this, and then get product, and it's going to do that. And it just feels kind of really untidy. And especially when you start adding other methods, and then you start sort of parsing out the kind of IDs from query strings and things like that. So let me just merge in my branch from last week. Episode 4. All right. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to take all of this code and we're going to refactor it again. But this time, what I want to do is I want to look at something called the Gorilla Web Toolkit. So the nice thing about the Gorilla Web Toolkit is that it has a number of different sort of capabilities. But some of the things that I really like is this Mux package. So I'll put the link up there for the kind of the previous session where we started looking at Mux. And of course, go back through the playlists if you haven't seen all that stuff. But I think one of the key things about the Serve Mux that's built into Go, it's quite good and it's quite powerful, but there's some bits missing. Now the Gorilla web framework has got a much more refined Mux router. We can do things like this. We can define placeholders to be able to extract categories or something from our RESTful URIs. I can also define things like an ID, and I can specify what the format is using a regex. So here, this regex is saying that the ID is going to consist of numbers between 0 and 9, and it's going to be one or more of those. And it'll put that into an ID variable. So I don't have to kind of go through all of that kind of hassle myself, where I'm doing all of this extraction and then I'm validating this and validating that. This is wasteful code. Some of the other things that I really like with this framework is that it can handle middlewares as well. So not only can we kind of get rid of a lot of the boilerplate around the URIs and the methods, but we can add middleware. And one of the kind of the key things that we had around our kind of our previous example is that we ended up doing this validation around the product. And we kept doing that like a number of different places. We had it on the post and we had it on the put. So we're extracting, we're validating, and then we're returning an error. Well, we're not actually validating, we should be, but we can actually extract all of this out into middleware, and we're going to see that in this episode. We're going to refactor all of that out, put Gorilla in. It's going to be sweet, and you're going to love it. I covered this in the last session. Gorilla was literally the first framework that I ever used in Go. That for me is a kind of a pretty big deal. The fact that I've been using this for a long time now, nearly, I don't know how many years, like 6 at minimum, but a long time. And it still stands. So let's dig in. Let's have a play and let's see what we can do with this. You ready? All right, let's go. Okay. So we have this this code. How are we going to refactor this out? So the first thing that we want to do is we probably want to like replace this servmux. But we're going to replace this servmux and we're going to replace it into with the router. But one thing we do need to do is we need to kind of refactor these as well. So let's start with the servmux. Let's just get rid of this the default one. So I'm not using the default one. I'm using the mux new router. So this is in the Gorilla mux package, and you can see that's imported there. So github.com/gorilla. I'll put the links in the description. I really recommend you check this out. So then what we're going to do is we can now actually register more detailed handlers on our router, and we can do things with paths. So one of the things that I want to be able to do is I'm gonna call this product, and you know, product on its own is just going to be the main get handler. So if I add that, I can add my product handler, and I can also add a method. So I can kind of specify at this level that I only want to be able to handle the products on there, which is really nice. Now, I think actually there's a nicer way to do it. And what a subrouter has the capability of doing, sorry, a router has got the concept of subrouters. And by defining these subrouters, we can kind of define a subrouter for each method, and it allows us to kind of be a little bit more flexible with adding middleware to various different routes and stuff. So let's go through and let's set out that routing pattern. So I'm going to call my get router, and that's going to be my mux router, and it's going to be methods, and I'll show you that in just a second. Get dot subrouter. Whoops. So let's have a look at that that there in the documentation. So we have a router, and on a router you can add these, well, routes, and you can add methods. So methods register a new route with a matcher for HTTP methods. So what this means is that I can define I can basically create a route which is only applicable to, let's say, get, and then I can register my handlers onto that. Now, what I can also do with this is route can be converted into a subrouter. And if I just scroll back to the API documentation, which is in here somewhere, I'm sure it is, we will see, there we go, that a subrouter creates a subrouter for the route. All right, this, I'll be honest with you, is probably making no sense whatsoever. So let me put something together in code and I'll explain. So what I've done here is I've got my router. This is my root router, the root router. And I want to kind of start filtering this down. I only want to send GET requests to a particular HTTP handler. So what I can do is I can use the methods method on the router. And what this is doing is this gives me a route which is filtered specifically for the HTTP verb GET. Then if I use the subrouter method on the root, it converts it into a router, the same as SM. And once it's a router, I can do things like add my handle on there. So I can do things like this, right? Get router dot handle func, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't expect Go to be properly working here, because did I mention that Go tooling is terribly broken right now? Okay, so I'm going to handle my function, right? So which function do I want to pass? Well, what I want to do is I really want to just go directly to my get function, which I've defined here on my handler. So in my handler, when I was setting this up last week, I ended up putting all of this stuff into serve HTTP to be able to kind of handle all of this subrouting, to be able to extract all of the IDs and all of that. I'm going to do my absolute favorite thing with code. I'm just going to delete all of that garbage. And it's gone, because we don't need it anymore. What I'm going to do though is I'm just going to convert this get product to a public, because now rather than having to roll all of that code myself, I can just do it really nicely here. So let's just check that out. Let's just make sure everything's working. So go run main.go. Okay, that's looking good. And let me curl localhost 9090, and there we are. Okay, so we've got our product listing exactly as we had it last week. So now let's add the other methods into there. So what I want to do is I want to create a router for put requests. So I'm going to call this a put router. And this is going to be, again, exactly the same thing. So I'm creating that filter, HTTP verb put. I could actually even use the just in case I spell get or put wrong. I mean, it's probable. I mean, my buddy Eric probably would agree that that's not past me. Put my sub router, create my put router. Let's handle a function, okay. Now, we defined in our put router that we were going to have this identifier. So let's add that identifier in here, because we're going to put, and we're just kind of going to pull the ID out of the string. So I can define a variable for Gorilla Mux, and I'm going to call that variable ID. And I'm going to use a regex. So 0 to 9. And more than one or more. Okay. So you see the curly brackets here. This is how I define a regex, which will be automatically extracted out of the URI by the Gorilla router. And then I just define the regex, because it's going to just kind of define the split by using this colon here. And then I can add my ph.put router, which I've, again, just need to do a little refactoring. So, I call this one update. That's fine. Update products. So again, I'm just making that public because I don't have that kind of root serve HTTP method anymore. All of that's been refactored out and has gone in the bin. And we're gonna just kind of look at this, and you can see that, well, update products originally took an ID. Now again, we don't need to kind of have that ID in there. So what Gorilla does is, Gorilla, when you define those variables inside of your URIs, it's going to extract them out into a collection called mux.vars. So I can do vars equals mux.vars. Okay. And you pass it the request. So with mux.vars, vars now will have an ID. So to get the ID for my collection, I can just do vars, and it's just a map. ID like that. So now I can do print line, get product, and let's just stick the ID in there. So this now is really, really clean, right? I mean, really, really simple. We're not parsing any of that. We don't need to worry that we're making mistakes by kind of parsing any of these things out. We're just defining these placeholders inside of our mux URI. It's very nice and very clean. And we can see that in action too. So again, let's just run, what are we complaining about? Okay, so cannot use ID type string as type int in arg of update product. Fair enough. Because we have an ID there, well, we are pretty sure that that is going to be an ID because the regex, I mean, if it's not an integer, the regex is going to fail. But let's just cast it anyway. So we're just going to do good coding practice. So string strcon dot a to I, convert it into an integer. Does that actually return me an error? I don't know. I can't remember. Well, we'll see. Mismatch 1 returns 2 values. Yes, it does. So again, we're just going to check that error. If error is not equal to nil, which it pretty much never will be, but I'm going to check it anyway. Good defensive coding. HTTP dot error rw unable to convert ID. HTTP dot status. I guess it's a bad request. Return. All right. So just standard stuff there. Nothing special. And what do we got? No product on 61. So 61, okay, because we've already defined error. All right, so we're running. So let's do our put request. So we're going to do x put. We're going to do, we're going to update the first one. We ascertained last week that I couldn't spell anything other than T. So I am going to update my latte to T. So I'm just going to rename it. Let's just name T. Oh gosh, can't type, never mind. And we run that. Unable to marshal JSON. Well, probably. Let's have a look. What do we got? Blah, 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 blah. All right, there we go. So we've handled the put of our product. We've updated that. So if we get our product again, we can see now that that's T. So that's working as it was last week. So just kind of quickly recapping there, we've deleted a huge amount of code. We've deleted about 20 lines of code. We've introduced this new router, and we're now kind of doing the filtering of the put requests and the get requests. We're doing it at this level here by creating these subrouters for every HTTP verb. I can do exactly the same thing. So let's do the same for our post. So I'm going to do post router sm dot methods http dot method post subrouter, and then I can do my post router dot handle func. You know, if you want to, you could absolutely be sort of creating separate handlers for each of these. I'm just using functions, and I'm just using handle func. I don't think it kind of really matters. I think the kind of the key thing around what you choose here is things like testability, readability. There's not a great deal of code here for it to be too much to be handled by a single file, or the need to have a separate handler, but whatever you want to roll with, you can do. All right, add product. So again, we've got exactly the same thing. Let's just give that a very quick test. Go run. Okay, so this time I'm going to do a post. And now I should have 3 items in here. You see, I've got my latte, I've got my espresso, and now I have my, well, I don't have my tea. Why don't I have my tea? Well, let's have a look at what miraculous typing mistake I've made here then. Did I actually save that and rerun it? Oh gosh, just pressing buttons everywhere. Blah blah blah. Post router as a Mendel post add product. Oh, okay. So all of that should be fine. Now I'm doing something stupid here, and I will be darned if I can find out what it is. Well, I can tell you exactly what it is. I don't have that path registered for a start, so there we go. But it proves that my router's working. So you got to look at it on the bright side, right? But let's quickly just look at, get that product, and now we've got 3 as we would expect. All right, cool. Everybody makes mistakes, including me, lots of them. So this is cool. We've done a nice little bit of refactoring here. We've now got, I think, some much cleaner code. It's very, very specific. We know exactly what's going on. I love this. But if you remember as well, last week, we were kind of saying, well, you know, we've got this, we're extracting the product every time, and I'll be honest with you, we should be validating this object as well, which we're not. We will look at validation. I think we'll probably look at validation next week, and I'll show you a great tool for doing object validation. But how do we do that? Like, let's avoid that duplicate code. So there's a couple of things we could do. One thing that we could do is that we could put this into a function, and that would work. Or we could use middleware, and I want to show you middleware because the kind of the middleware sits outside, and it's actually a nice excuse just to show you how it works. So let's take a look at the docs. Middleware. All right, the use function. So the use function in the Gorilla toolkit allows you to apply middleware. So what is middleware? Well, middleware is just an HTTP handler. And what you can do is use this middleware pattern, and you can kind of chain multiple handlers together. So like a classic example for using middleware is doing things like cores. You want to be able to just validate requests just using the cores for JavaScript access, or you want to do authentication. Middleware is a kind of a really nice example of where you can kind of do this sort of stuff. And I'm scrolling around because this is just way too big on my screen. Router use. And it's really easy. So there is this middleware function. And let's have a look at what that looks like, what it looks like to be able to define middleware. So first things first, let's look at the signature for middleware function. So middleware function is here. And it's a very, very simple signature. So it just returns an HTTP handler. So as an example of that, like, let's have a look at how we could implement our own middleware. So we're going to do it in our products. And again, we could extract this out. We could have it in a completely separate thing if we want to, but I think this is fine for now, the size of the code that we've got. So P products, and it is going to be, let's call it middleware product validation. And the type of this is going to be the HTTP handler. So this is going to be the next handler that we're going to get. And we need to return an HTTP handler. So we're just going to do return HTTP dot handler func, and we're going to just do RW HTTP dot response writer. So that's standard pattern. That's an interface. It is not a reference, but request is a reference. So we define our middleware, which is really straightforward. What we're kind of going to end up, something which is going to look like, is this. It's, you know, it's really, 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 really simple. Let's dig in. All right. So the thing that we want to be able to do is we want to validate that request. So we can take our product and we can deserialize it. So P prod is going to be our product, and we're going to create a new one of those. So it's data dot. Well, actually, we can just copy this. Really, really, really simple. This is the best way to refactor. So we're just saying that we're going to just decode this product from JSON. If we can't, we're going to return. And that means that the chain will stop dead. We're not going to be calling any more elements in this handler chain. However, if we succeed, what we want to do is put that product somewhere so that we can use it later on. So the place that we're going to put it is onto the request, because the request has a context. So I can define my new context, CTX, and it's just going to be a request dot context, and I can do with value if this would just autocomplete, but no. That would be asking too much, but it's no big deal. So a context, the way that you kind of use a context in Go, the HTTP context, is that you need to define a key. You could use strings as keys, but the kind of the preferred approach is to use types as keys. So I can just quickly define a key. So I'm just going to call it key product, and it's just of type struct. So then when I can do my context with value, I can use my key product, and we can specify our value. So that adds that'll create me a new context from the context that's already on the request. So the next thing I can do is just kind of create a copy of that request that I'm going to call the upstream with. So that's just going to be r.with context whoops, context, and then I'm going to call next. So it's going to be next dot serve HTTP, because it's a next is a handler, and I'm going to specify my response writer and my request. And that's all I need to define there. So then now I've got my middleware. What I can do is I can use it. So I created this subrouter. A subrouter has a use function which takes a middleware. The middleware I've just created, which is my middleware validate product, just this here. I can apply that to both the put and the get request. So now what we have is this middleware. So the middleware will run, the middleware will get executed before the actual handler code. So in terms of the request comes in to the server. It's going to get picked up by the router. The router is going to say, hey, that's a put request. Send that to the put subrouter. The put subrouter is going to say, oh, well, I've got this middleware. So it'll execute the middleware. If that passes, then it goes into the handle func. And the same for the post. So we now, in our code for the put and our post, well, we are kind of doing all of this stuff. We're getting the product out of there. We can just completely remove all of that. We can delete all of this code. So update products. We need a product. Where are we going to get the product from? Well, we're getting the product from the request. So it is prod, whoops, and it's going to be request dot context dot value, and then we're going to use that key. So key product. And of course, this is just going to return us an interface. So we do need to cast it. It's going to be pretty safe just to cast this because it's impossible for anything to get into this function here without it going through the middleware first. And the middleware, we're ensuring that that's happening. So we're just going to data dot, we'll just cast that like that. And then in our post handler as well, we can do exactly the same thing. Delete all that code, which is always nice. Let's build our code. What do we got? An error there, line 68, expecting func line products, line 68. 68, blah, blah, blah. Is it sure? Well, it's not the right product because I was showing you that one as an example earlier on. Line 68, blah, blah, blah. It's complaining about this. So we've got HTTP handler. That returns there. And that will return an HTTP handler func. What am I doing wrong there? Let me just have a quick snoop. Oh gosh, yeah. I give up. It's a func, isn't it? Yes, yes it is. Blah. Come on, what are you complaining about now? Did that save? If anybody is completely new to Golang and wondering why IntelliSense just does not work anymore, it unfortunately is due to the move away from modules and into the towards the Google kind of modules thing. I'm just going to copy this. Is unfortunately going to take a little bit of time. And in the meantime, you do end up with a sort of a situation where you get somewhat working IntelliSense. Oh, what am I doing wrong? Yeah, I think I fixed that one up. Did it save? Expected func, expecting bracket. Handle func, not handler func. Well, I am a little bit confused as to what I'm doing, so I'm not going to bother you with me kind of staring into blank spaces to be lordy. I'm just going to wow, it really is not. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, good call, Terakilobyte. We missed that one. Cannot use type as product. Let's have a look. Products. What is this? What does update products take? Okay, that takes a reference, so that's fine. Let me just update that. And it will be the same input. Actually takes a reference. Finally. Thank you, chat. All right, so that's working there. We can now just do our put again. That blew up. Let's have a look. That shouldn't work. So, whoops, /1. Error reading product. Interesting. It's not a data product. Let's have a look at our middleware, see what is going wrong here. So blah, blah, blah. Creating a new context with value, key product. Oh, that's like this, isn't it? I think. Oh, just all the problems today. Yeah, good call. Thank you very much, chat. All right. So let's update T. So we've updated our T for our first product. No, not what I wanted to do. Just wanted to do a get. But we've got T there, updated our first product. We can now add a new product. We're going to call this T. What can we call it? What beverages would you buy in Starbucks? Water. Some things in Go are very weird. Yes, I agree with you. But then we've handled our post there, and we can get that. And you see there we now have our third item called water. So we've done a little bit of refactoring. So we've refactored out the code from last week. We've now got this kind of mux router in, and I've been doing Go for, like, I swear to you, about 7 years, and it still makes me trip over my feet. We've got all of this, the post router, we've got our put router in there, we've refactored our products. So we've now kind of removed all of that nasty code, which was kind of all that duplication, the manual parsing of any of the URIs and things like that. And we've also kind of removed some duplication. So we created this like middleware validation function, which is I think is a reasonable use of how you can kind of see how to use the router in Gorilla. And I think then that's a kind of a pretty good start. So where do we go from here? That is a very good question. And next week, what we are going to do is we're going to have a look at doing some validation on our struts. So I'm going to look at a package called Go Validator, which I think is a really nice little tool. And we can start putting validation on our put and post requests. We can check things like minimum lengths on strut fields, that fields are present, and the numbers are numbers, and things like that. And I'm thanking you again for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series. I'll put a link up here of the previous episode, just in case you want to kind of go back and watch. But I will see you next time, next Sunday, and thank you very much.